The stagecoach lurched to a halt in front of the Concord, California trading post, and Zachariah York knew immediately that something had gone terribly wrong with his carefully laid plans when a woman in a tattered traveling dress stepped down instead of the crates of farming equipment he had ordered from San Francisco. Zachariah stood 6 feet tall in his worn leather boots, his weathered face shadowed by the brim of his hat as he watched the woman stumble slightly on the dusty ground. It was late September 1872, and the afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on the small settlement that had sprung up along the stage route between San Francisco and Sacramento. He had saved for 3 years to afford those implements, every spare dollar from his ranch going toward building something lasting, something that would survive beyond himself. The woman looked around with wide eyes that seemed to take in everything at once, her dark hair escaping from pins that had clearly given up their hold somewhere along the rough journey. She clutched a worn carpetbag in both hands like it was the only thing tethering her to the earth. Her dress had once been a respectable green wool, but now it bore the stains of travel and what looked like soot from a train engine. "Are you waiting for someone?" she asked, her voice carrying a tremor that spoke of exhaustion rather than fear. Zachariah removed his hat, manners ingrained from childhood overriding his disappointment. "I was waiting for a shipment, madam. Seems the stage company got their deliveries mixed up." The driver, old Pete Hammond, climbed down from his perch with a grunt. "Sorry about the confusion, Zach. Got a notice in Sacramento that your freight got delayed. Something about a warehouse fire. This here is Miss Everly. She paid for passage to Concord." The woman, Miss Everly, set her bag down and brushed dust from her skirt with trembling hands. "I apologize if I have caused any inconvenience. I was told there would be a boarding house here, or at least someone who could direct me to employment opportunities." Zachariah studied her more carefully now. She was younger than he had first thought, perhaps 23 or 24, with a face that would have been pretty if not for the exhaustion etched into every feature. Her eyes were an unusual shade of gray-green, like sage after rain, and they held a determination that seemed at odds with her bedraggled appearance. "There is not much in the way of boarding houses," Zachariah said slowly. "Mrs. Chen runs a place above the general store, but she only has 2 rooms and they are usually full up with miners passing through to the hills." "I see." Miss Everly's shoulders sagged slightly, and she reached up to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear. "Perhaps the general store needs help. I can keep accounts and I am experienced in managing household affairs." Pete Hammond cleared his throat. "Miss, I hate to be the bearer of more bad news, but the general store is run by Mr. Chen and his 3 daughters. They are not looking for help." He glanced at Zachariah with an expression that clearly said this was now his problem. Zachariah felt the weight of responsibility settle on him like a too heavy saddle. He had never been able to turn away from someone in genuine need, a trait his father had always said would either make him a saint or a fool. "What brought you to Concord, Miss Everly, if you do not mind my asking?" She lifted her chin, and he saw pride war with desperation in her expression. "I answered an advertisement for a position as a governess. The family was supposed to meet me here and take me to their ranch, but there is no one." Her voice cracked slightly on the last word. "Let me check at the trading post," Zachariah said. "Maybe they left word." The trading post was a low-slung building that served as the unofficial center of Concord's scattered community. Inside, the proprietor, a grizzled former trapper named Dutch Miller, was arranging bottles on a shelf. He turned when Zachariah entered, his one good eye taking in the situation outside with practiced assessment. "Dutch, you know anything about a family looking for a governess? They were supposed to meet the stage today." Dutch scratched his bearded chin. "The Ashford place out past Willow Creek. They sent a letter about hiring someone from back east." He paused, and Zachariah felt his stomach sink at the expression on the older man's face. "But that was 2 months ago, Zach. James Ashford took sick with the fever that went through the valley. He died 3 weeks back. His wife took the children and went to live with her sister in Sacramento. Zachariah stepped back outside where Miss Everly waited, her posture rigidly hopeful. Pete was already unhitching the horses, clearly planning to spend the night at the way station before heading back to Sacramento in the morning. Miss Everly, I am afraid there has been a misunderstanding. The family who was hiring, the Ashfords, they had some trouble. They are no longer in the area. He watched the color drain from her face, leaving her pale beneath the dust and sunburn. For a moment he thought she might faint, but she locked her knees and forced herself to remain upright. "I see," she said again, and this time her voice was barely above a whisper. "I spent everything I had on the train fare and the stage passage. I have $3.20 to my name." The admission clearly cost her dearly. Zachariah felt something shift in his chest, a protective instinct he had not experienced since his younger sister had died of scarlet fever 10 years ago. "Miss Everly," he said carefully, "I have a proposition. My ranch is about 5 miles north of here. It is not much, just a small operation with cattle and horses, but I could use help with the household management. Cooking, cleaning, that sort of thing. I can offer you room and board and $15 a month." She looked at him with those sage-colored eyes, and he saw suspicion there mixed with desperate hope. "You do not know anything about me. I could be a terrible cook. I could be a thief." "Are you a thief?" "No. Can you make biscuits that will not break a man's teeth?" A ghost of a smile flickered across her face. "Yes, I can make decent biscuits. Then we have the foundation of an arrangement. I will not mislead you, Miss Everly. It is a hard life out there. The cabin is small and you would have your own room, but it is rough living. I am gone most days with the cattle, and you would be on your own a fair amount. But you would be safe, and you would have a roof over your head while you figure out what comes next." She studied him for a long moment, and Zachariah wondered what she saw. He was 32 years old, worn down by sun and work, scarred from too many encounters with ornery cattle and unforgiving land. His clothes were clean but mended in multiple places, and his boots had seen better days. He was not much to look at, and he knew it. "Why are you helping me?" she asked finally. "Because someone should," he said simply, "and because I happen to need help. Seems like our bad luck might cancel each other out." She bent to pick up her carpet bag, and he noticed her hands were shaking. "Then I accept your offer, Mr. York. But I should tell you something right now before we go any further. I am not what you ordered. I am not some neat package that will solve all your problems. I am complicated, and I have made mistakes, and I am running from things I am not proud of." Zachariah settled his hat back on his head and reached for her bag, taking it from her unresisting fingers. "Miss Everly, I did not order you at all, but I have a feeling you are exactly what I needed." The ride to the ranch took them through golden hills dotted with oak trees, their shadows lengthening as the sun began its descent. Zachariah had hitched his 2 horses to the wagon he used for supply runs, and Miss Everly, who had finally told him her given name was Penelope, sat beside him on the bench seat. She had been silent for most of the journey, her hands clasped in her lap, her eyes taking in the landscape with an expression he could not quite read. "It is beautiful here," she said suddenly. "Different from what I expected." "What did you expect?" "I am not sure." "Dust and desperation, I suppose, but this is almost pastoral." Zachariah glanced at her, noting the way the fading light caught in her hair, turning it copper at the edges. "It can be both. The land gives and takes in equal measure. This time of year, after the summer heat but before the winter rains, it is about as pretty as it gets." "Where are you from originally?" she asked, and he heard genuine curiosity in her voice. "Missouri. My father had a farm outside of Independence. I came west in '63 after my mother and sister died. My father went soon after. There was nothing to hold me there, and I had heard there was opportunity out here for a man willing to work hard. And is there? Opportunity, I mean. Some days I think so, others I'm not so sure." He paused, then added, "What about you? Where are you running from? Penelope was quiet for so long he thought she would not answer. Then she said, "Boston, I was engaged to be married. He was a lawyer, very respectable from a good family. 3 weeks before the wedding, I discovered he already had a wife in New York and 2 children he had never mentioned. When I confronted him, he laughed and said it did not matter, that I should be grateful he was willing to marry me at all given that I had no real family or fortune." Zachariah felt anger kindle in his chest. "You broke it off." "I did more than that. I went to his law partners and told them everything. He lost his position. And his real wife, it turns out, was the daughter of a very wealthy man who did not take kindly to being made a fool. Last I heard, he was facing charges for fraud." She twisted her hands together. "But it meant I could not stay in Boston. His family has connections, and they made it very clear I was not welcome. So I took what little savings I had and answered the first advertisement I saw for employment out west." "You did the right thing," Zachariah said firmly. "He sounds like he deserved worse." "Perhaps, but doing the right thing left me standing in the dust in a town I had never heard of with nowhere to go and no prospects." She turned to look at him directly. "So you see, Mr. York, I am not some damsel in distress from a dime novel. I am a woman who burned her own bridges and has to live with the consequences. Call me Zachariah, and it seems to me you are a woman with courage enough to stand up for herself. That counts for something out here." The ranch came into view as they crested a low hill. It was modest, as he had warned her. A cabin made of rough-hewn logs with a stone chimney, a barn that leaned slightly to the left, a corral that held 3 horses, and a chicken coop that had seen better days. Beyond, the land rolled out in gentle swells, dotted with grazing cattle. Penelope did not say anything as they approached, but Zachariah found himself seeing it through her eyes, trying to imagine what a woman from Boston would think of this place he had built with his own hands. "The cabin has 2 rooms," he said as he pulled the wagon to a stop. "You will have the back room. It has a real bed frame and a window. I sleep in the main room by the fireplace. There is a pump out back for water and the privy is behind the barn." "It is more than I expected," she said quietly. He helped her down from the wagon, his hands steadying her waist for just a moment before releasing her. She was so light, he thought, too light. He wondered when she had last had a proper meal. Inside, the cabin was neat if sparse. Zachariah kept things clean out of habit, but there was no denying the space lacked any warmth or comfort. A table with 2 chairs, a fireplace with a cooking pot and skillet, shelves holding supplies, and his bedroll spread near the hearth. That was the extent of his worldly possessions. Aside from his tools and tack in the barn, Penelope set her carpet bag down and looked around with an assessing eye. "You said you have been here 9 years. Built this place with my own hands 7 years ago, lived in a tent before that." "Then you have been too busy surviving to think about living," she said, and there was understanding rather than judgment in her voice. He showed her to the back room, which held a narrow bed, a trunk he had never filled, and a window that overlooked the eastern hills. "It is not much," he said again. "It is mine," she replied, and the way she said it made him realize how long it had been since she had anything she could claim as her own. That night, Zachariah slept fitfully, aware of another person in his home for the first time in years. He woke before dawn, as always, and quietly built up the fire before heading out to tend the animals. When he returned an hour later, the smell of coffee and frying bacon greeted him, and he found Penelope standing at the stove, her hair braided back, wearing a simple calico dress he had not seen before. "I hope you do not mind," she said without turning around. "I found the supplies and thought I should earn my keep." "Mind? Miss Everlie, the fact that someone else is cooking might be the best thing that has happened to me all year." She did turn then, and he saw she had been crying at some point, her eyes slightly red-rimmed, but her smile was real. "Penelope, if we are going to be sharing a roof, you should call me Penelope." "Penelope," he repeated, liking the sound of it. "And you should call me Zachariah or Zach if that is easier." They sat across from each other at the small table, and Zachariah ate the best breakfast he had tasted in months. The eggs were perfectly cooked, the bacon crisp, and the biscuits light and fluffy. He told her so, and color rose in her cheeks. "My mother died when I was 12, she said. After that, it was just my father and me. He was a professor at the university, always lost in his books, so I learned to run the household. When he died 3 years ago, I had no choice but to find employment. That is how you ended up engaged to the fraud." His name was Theodore Whitmore, and yes, that is how I ended up in his orbit. I was working as a companion to an elderly woman. He was handling her legal affairs. He seemed kind at first, attentive. I was lonely, and he knew exactly what to say. She pushed food around her plate. I was a fool. "You were human. There is a difference." After breakfast, Zachariah showed her around the property properly. The chickens needed tending, the vegetable garden he had neglected was full of weeds, and the inside of the barn needed mucking out. Penelope took it all in with a practical eye, asking questions about his operation, how many head of cattle he ran, what his plans were for the winter. "I have about 200 heads scattered across my grazing range," he explained. "It is open range mostly, but I am slowly buying up parcels when I can. Eventually, I want to fence it properly, breed better stock, but that takes money and time." "How do you manage it alone?" "I do not really. There are 2 other ranchers nearby, Ben Sullivan and his son Thomas. We help each other out during roundup and branding, and there is a circuit judge who comes through once a month and a traveling preacher every few weeks. That is about the extent of our society out here." It sounds lonely, he considered that. It is what I chose. After losing everyone back home, I wanted space, room to breathe. Out here, the problems are simple, even if they are not easy. Cattle need grass and water. Predators need to be dealt with. Weather does what it will. There is a clarity to it. Penelope was quiet for a moment, watching a hawk circle overhead. "I think I understand that. In Boston, everything was so complicated, so many unspoken rules and expectations. Out here, things seem more honest somehow." Over the following days, they fell into a rhythm. Zachariah rode out each morning to check on the cattle, fix fences, and do the 100 small tasks that kept a ranch functioning. Penelope transformed the cabin, cleaning corners he had not even realized were dirty, mending his clothes and cooking meals that made him remember what it was like to have a home rather than just a place to sleep. She worked in the garden, bringing order to the chaos, and she spent time with the chickens, even naming them, which Zachariah found both amusing and oddly touching. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire, and slowly, carefully, they began to talk about more than just the day's work. Penelope told him about growing up in Boston, about her father's passion for Greek philosophy, about the books she had read, and the dreams she had once had of traveling to Europe. Zachariah talked about Missouri, about learning to ride before he could properly walk, about the way his mother used to sing while she cooked, and about the ache of watching everything familiar slip away. "Do you regret coming west?" she asked one night. He thought about it, really thought about it. "No, it nearly killed me that first year, the loneliness and the work, but I built something here. It is mine in a way nothing ever was back home. When I look at that barn, I know every nail I hammered. When I see the cattle, I remember buying the first 10 head with money I saved working at the docks in San Francisco. It is hard-won, and that makes it valuable." "I think I am beginning to understand that," Penelope said softly. "The value of something you build yourself." 3 weeks after Penelope arrived, Zachariah came back from checking the north pasture to find her standing in the yard with a shotgun pointed at 2 men on horseback. Her hands were steady, her stance solid, and the expression on her face was pure steel. "Penelope," he said carefully, dismounting slowly. "What is going on?" "These gentlemen were just leaving," she said, her voice cold as creek water in January. "They seemed to be under the impression that I was some kind of entertainment. I corrected their misunderstanding." The 2 men were young, probably miners or drifters, and they looked both angry and embarrassed. The one on the left, a wiry man with a scar on his jaw, spat in the dust. We did not mean nothing by it, just wanted to say hello to the lady, by asking her price. Zachariah felt rage building in his chest, hot and dangerous. Get off my property. Now. You cannot just claim a woman like a piece of land, Scarface sneered. Maybe she wants better company than some dirt farmer. Zachariah was off his horse and moving before he fully registered the decision. He grabbed the man's leg and yanked him from the saddle, sending him sprawling in the dust. The second man started to dismount, but the sound of Penelope cocking the shotgun stopped him cold. I would stay right where you are, she said pleasantly. I am an excellent shot, and I have had a very trying few weeks. Zachariah hauled Scarface up by his shirt front and slammed him against his horse. This woman is under my protection. That means she is off limits to trash like you. You spread the word. Anyone who comes to this ranch treats her with respect or they answer to me. Are we clear? The man nodded, fear finally showing in his eyes. Zachariah released him and stepped back. Now get out of here before I let her shoot you just for the principle of it. They rode off at a gallop, dust trailing behind them. Zachariah turned to find Penelope lowering the shotgun, her hands starting to shake now that the danger had passed. He took the weapon from her gently and set it aside, then pulled her into his arms without thinking. Are you all right? He asked, and he could feel her trembling against him. I am fine. I have dealt with worse than crude propositions. But her voice was muffled against his chest, and he felt moisture seeping through his shirt. You should not have to deal with any of it, he said fiercely. Penelope, I am sorry. I should have thought about how it would look, a woman alone out here with me. I have put your reputation at risk. She pulled back enough to look up at him, and he realized he was still holding her, his arms wrapped around her waist. My reputation was already in tatters before I arrived. And I would rather face crude men with a shotgun than go back to Boston and pretend to be something I am not. He found himself noticing things he had been trying very hard not to notice over the past weeks. The way her hair caught the light. The scatter of freckles across her nose that the California sun had coaxed out. The exact color of her eyes, which shifted from gray to green depending on her mood. The way his cabin had become a home since she arrived, warm and welcoming in ways that had nothing to do with the temperature. Zachariah, she said softly, and he realized he had been staring. I am glad you are here, he said, the words feeling inadequate for what he was actually feeling. I know that is selfish of me given the circumstances, but I am glad. A smile tugged at her lips. I am glad too. Even with the occasional unwelcome visitor. He released her reluctantly and stepped back, trying to regain some professional distance. I am going to ride into town and have a word with Dutch, make sure people understand the situation. What is the situation? She asked, and there was something in her voice, a question beneath the question. That you are my employee and under my protection, he said firmly, and that anyone who disrespects you will have me to deal with. That evening, after he returned from town where he had indeed made his position very clear to Dutch and anyone else in earshot, they sat by the fire as had become their custom. But something had shifted between them, a awareness that hummed in the air like the moment before a summer storm. Tell me about your dreams, Penelope said suddenly. Not the practical ones about fencing and cattle, the real ones. Zachariah stared into the fire, surprised by the question. I do not think I have let myself dream in a long time. Dreaming seems dangerous when you are just trying to survive. But you are not just surviving anymore. You have built something solid here. So what comes next? He thought about it, really let himself think about it for the first time in years. A real house, he said slowly. Something built from milled lumber with glass windows and a wood floor. A front porch where someone could sit in the evening and watch the sunset. A barn that does not lean, pastures full of healthy cattle and horses, maybe some fruit trees. He paused, then added quietly, a family, people to share it all with, to make it mean something beyond just my own survival. Penelope was silent for a long moment. That is a good dream, she finally said, worthy of working toward. What about you? What do you dream about? She pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders. Belonging somewhere. Not being something that people feel obligated to tolerate, but actually belonging. Having a purpose beyond just existing, being part of something bigger than myself. She laughed softly, but there was no humor in it. I used to dream about adventure and romance, about being swept away to exotic places. But now, I think the real adventure is building something that lasts, putting down roots deep enough that the wind cannot blow you away. You belong here, Zachariah said, and he meant it with every fiber of his being. I know it has only been a few weeks, but this place is better with you in it. I am better with you in it. She turned to look at him, and the firelight played across her face, highlighting the emotions there, hope and fear and something else, something that made his breath catch. Zachariah, I need you to understand something. I am not looking for someone to rescue me. I do not want to be a burden or an obligation. If I stay here, if this becomes more than just a temporary arrangement, it has to be because we are building something together, as equals. He reached out and took her hand, feeling the calluses that had formed over the past weeks from hard work. Penelope Everlie, I cannot think of anyone I would rather build something with. The kiss happened so naturally it felt inevitable, a coming together that was both gentle and passionate, a promise of everything unspoken between them. When they finally pulled apart, Penelope was smiling, really smiling in a way he had never seen before. Well, she said breathlessly, I suppose that changes things. I hope so, he replied, grinning like a fool, because I think I might be falling in love with you. Might be. She raised an eyebrow. That is not a very definitive statement, Zachariah York. Fine. I am falling in love with you, probably have been since you stepped off that stage looking like you would fight the whole world if necessary. That is better. She kissed him again, softer this time. And for the record, I am falling in love with you too. You and your noble cowboy heart and your dreams of fruit trees. The next weeks passed in a haze of work and stolen moments, of learning to navigate this new dimension of their relationship while still managing the daily demands of ranch life. Zachariah found himself working harder than ever, driven by those dreams they had talked about, wanting to build something worthy of the future he was starting to imagine. In early November, he rode into Concord and sent a telegram to a lumber mill in Sacramento, placing an order for materials. He cashed in bonds he had been saving for years and made arrangements with a freighter to deliver supplies. When he got back to the ranch, Penelope was waiting with curiosity written all over her face. What did you do? She asked. Ordered materials for a real house, something we can grow into. The word hung in the air between them. He took her hands in his. Penelope, I know we have not known each other long. By most standards, this is crazy and impulsive. But out here, things move differently. When you know something is right, you do not waste time questioning it. I love you. I want to build a life with you, a real life. I want to marry you and raise children with you and grow old watching sunsets from that front porch. What do you say? Tears were streaming down her face, but she was smiling. I say yes. Yes to all of it. The house and the marriage and the future. Yes to building something together. He swept her up and spun her around, both of them laughing like children. When he set her down, she grabbed his face and kissed him soundly. When? She asked. The circuit preacher is due through in 2 weeks. We can do it then, if that is not too soon. It is perfect, but Zachariah, I do not have anything. No fancy dress, no family to invite, no dowry to bring to this marriage. You have yourself, and that is more than enough, more than I deserve. The wedding took place on a crisp morning in late November, with the preacher performing the ceremony in front of the fireplace in their cabin. Ben Sullivan and his son Thomas stood as witnesses, along with Mrs. Chen from town and Dutch Miller. Penelope wore a simple blue dress that Mrs. Chen had helped her make, and she carried wildflowers that were among the last blooms of the season. Zachariah had never been much for sentiment, but when Penelope said her vows, her voice clear and strong, he felt something in his chest crack open, all the walls he had built around his heart crumbling away. This woman who had arrived on a stage meant to carry farming equipment, who had been abandoned and betrayed, who had every reason to be bitter and broken, was choosing him. Choosing this life. Choosing to believe in something better. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the preacher said, and Zachariah kissed his bride with a joy he had not known he was capable of feeling. The small gathering celebrated with a meal Penelope and Mrs. Chen had prepared, and Dutch gifted them a bottle of whiskey he swore was the finest west of the Mississippi. Ben and Thomas stayed to help Zachariah begin work on the new house, framing out the foundation before they left at dusk. That night, alone for the first time as husband and wife, Zachariah carried Penelope over the threshold of the cabin in the old tradition, and they laughed at the absurdity of the gesture given they had been living under the same roof for weeks. "I love you," he said, setting her down gently. "Today and every day." "I love you too," she replied, and then there were no more words, only the language of two people discovering each other, building something new in the oldest way humanity knew. Winter came to California gently that year, bringing rain but no snow at that elevation. Zachariah and Penelope worked on the house when weather permitted, and he taught her to ride so she could accompany him when he checked the cattle. She proved to be a natural horsewoman, sitting tall in the saddle, her face alight with the freedom of it. "I feel like I could ride forever," she said one afternoon, her horse dancing beneath her. "Just keep going and never look back." "Where would you go?" he asked, amused. "Nowhere, because everything I want is right here." They celebrated their first Christmas together with a small pine tree Zachariah cut from the hills and a feast Penelope spent days preparing. He gave her books he had ordered from San Francisco, knowing how she missed reading, and she gave him a shirt she had sewn herself, each stitch perfect. "I have something else for you," she said that night, and there was nervousness in her voice. "Or rather, I have news." He looked at her, really looked, and saw the way her hand rested on her stomach, the glow in her cheeks that had nothing to do with the firelight. "Penelope, I am with child. The baby should come in early summer." Joy crashed over him like a wave, and he pulled her into his arms, careful now, protective. "A baby, we are going to have a baby." "Are you happy?" she asked, and he heard uncertainty there. "Happy." "Penelope, I am terrified and thrilled and more grateful than I know how to say. A child, our child. A family," she whispered against his chest. "A real family." The winter passed in planning and preparation. Penelope sewed tiny clothes and Zachariah built a cradle from oak wood, sanding it smooth so no splinter could harm tender skin. The house progressed slowly but steadily, and by spring the frame was up and the roof was on. They moved in even though the interior walls were unfinished, delighting in the space and the light that poured through real glass windows. Penelope's pregnancy progressed smoothly, though she had moments of sickness in the early months and fatigue toward the end. Zachariah hovered, worried, until she finally told him firmly that women had been having babies since the dawn of time and she was perfectly capable of managing. "But I could lose you," he said quietly one night, voicing the fear that had been haunting him. "My mother died when my sister was born. My sister followed her within the week. I cannot lose you, Penelope, I would not survive it." She took his face in her hands. "You are not going to lose me. I am strong, and Mrs. Chen has agreed to come help when my time arrives. She has delivered dozens of babies. We are going to be fine, all of us." In late June, on a morning when the air was thick with the promise of heat, Penelope woke Zachariah with a calm statement that the baby was coming. He had planned to be calm and useful, but instead he found himself fumbling with the water pump, nearly falling off his horse riding to fetch Mrs. Chen, and generally making a fool of himself. Mrs. Chen, a small woman with iron in her spine, arrived and immediately took charge. She banished Zachariah from the house with instructions not to return until summoned, leaving him to pace in the yard like a caged animal. Ben Sullivan arrived around noon, having heard from his son who had seen Zachariah's panicked ride through Concord. "First child?" Ben asked, amused. "How can you tell? You have that look, like the world is ending and you are powerless to stop it." "I might be sick," Zachariah admitted. "That is normal too." The afternoon stretched into evening and Zachariah wore a path in the dirt from his pacing. He heard Penelope cry out once and he was halfway to the door before Ben stopped him. "Let Mrs. Chen do her work. Your job is to stay out of the way." Finally, as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, he heard it, the thin, angry wail of a newborn. Mrs. Chen appeared in the doorway, smiling. "You have a son, Mr. York, a healthy, loud son." Zachariah did not remember crossing the space to the house. He only remembered entering their bedroom and seeing Penelope propped up against pillows, exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in a blanket she had made. "Come meet your son," she said softly. He sat beside her carefully, afraid of disturbing them, and looked down at the red-faced infant who was his child. The baby had a shock of dark hair and was waving tiny fists in apparent outrage at being born. "He is perfect," Zachariah whispered. "You are perfect. How are you feeling?" "Tired." "Sore, happier than I have ever been in my life." She looked up at him with love shining in her eyes. "What should we name him?" They had discussed names endlessly over the winter, but now, looking at his son, Zachariah knew. "Samuel, after my father, Samuel York." "Samuel," Penelope repeated, testing it. "Yes, that fits him." Mrs. Chen stayed for 3 days, teaching Zachariah how to help care for the baby, showing him how to change cloths and how to support the tiny head. Penelope was a natural mother, patient and gentle, though there were moments of frustration when Samuel would not stop crying and exhaustion made everything harder. "I do not know what he wants," she said one night, tears of weariness streaming down her face. "I have fed him and changed him and rocked him, but he will not settle." Zachariah took the baby from her. "Go sleep. I will walk with him." He carried Samuel through the unfinished rooms of the house, talking to him in a low voice about everything and nothing. He told his son about the ranch, about the cattle and horses, about the dreams he had for the future. And slowly, miraculously, Samuel calmed, his eyes drifting closed. "You and me," Zachariah whispered. "We are going to take care of her together. She deserves the world, and we are going to do our best to give it to her." The summer passed in a blur of sleepless nights and small miracles. Samuel grew stronger, his eyes shifting from newborn blue to a greenish gray that was unmistakably his mother's. He started to smile, really smile, around 2 months old, and the first time he laughed, Penelope cried with joy. The ranch prospered that year. Cattle prices were good, and Zachariah was able to hire occasional help, freeing up more time to spend with his family. He finished the interior of the house, adding touches that Penelope suggested. A deep windowsill in the kitchen where she could grow herbs, built-in shelves for her growing collection of books, a large bedroom for them, and a smaller one for Samuel that could eventually hold more children. On their first anniversary, Zachariah surprised Penelope with a piano he had freighted in from San Francisco at enormous expense. She stared at it in disbelief, then burst into tears. "I have not played since my father died," she said. "I thought I never would again." "Then it is time to start," he said, leading her to the bench. She played haltingly at first, her fingers remembering slowly. But then the music came, pouring out of her like something that had been dammed up too long. She played pieces by Mozart and Beethoven. She played folk songs and hymns, and Samuel stopped fussing to listen, entranced by the sound. "Thank you," she said when she finally stopped, turning to wrap her arms around Zachariah's waist. "Thank you for giving me back something I thought I had lost forever." "You have given me everything," he replied simply. "A piano is a small thing in comparison." Winter came again, and this time they weathered it in comfort, their house warm and secure. Samuel took his first steps in February, lurching across the floor into his father's waiting arms. Penelope was pregnant again, due in late spring, And this time Zechariah was less terrified, though still vigilant. Their daughter was born on a May morning with apple blossoms scenting the air. The labor was shorter this time, easier, and when Mrs. Chen placed the baby in Zechariah's arms, he fell in love all over again with this tiny, perfect creature. "What shall we name her?" he asked Penelope. "Grace, for the grace that brought us together." Grace York was a peaceful baby, content to observe the world with solemn eyes. Samuel, now a year old, was fascinated by his sister, wanting to touch her constantly, to bring her his toys, to share everything with her. "He is going to be a good big brother," Penelope observed, watching them. "He learned from the best," Zechariah said, pulling her close. "You are an amazing mother. We are a good team," she corrected. "You are every bit as much a parent as I am. Not all men are so involved with their children." It was true. Zechariah could not imagine being distant from his children the way his own father had been. He wanted to know them, to be part of their daily lives, to teach them and learn from them. At night, after Penelope played the piano, he would tell Samuel and Grace stories, making up adventures about brave cowboys and wild horses and desert mountains. The years flowed past, each one building on the last. The ranch expanded as Zechariah bought neighboring land from families moving on or retiring. He hired 2 permanent hands, young men eager to learn, and the cattle operation grew substantial enough to provide real financial security. Samuel grew into a serious boy who loved the horses and showed his father's patience with animals. Grace was quieter but fiercely intelligent, always asking questions, always wanting to understand how things worked. They were joined by another son, Daniel, and then finally another daughter, Rose. Penelope managed the growing household with the same competence she had brought to that first morning cooking breakfast in the cabin. But she was more than just a wife and mother. She kept the ranch's books, proved to have a knack for negotiating prices, and started a small orchard that became known throughout the region for producing the best apples in 3 counties. "You remember that day?" Zechariah asked her one evening. They were sitting on the porch he had dreamed of, watching the sunset paint the hills gold. The children were inside, the older ones helping the younger ones get ready for bed. "Which day?" "The day you stepped off that stage and I realized my farming equipment was not coming." She laughed, the sound rich and full of life. "I remember being so tired I could barely stand and so scared I wanted to cry, and then there was this cowboy with kind eyes who offered me a lifeline. I remember thinking you looked like you would fight anyone who got in your way. I was ready to. I had nothing left to lose." He took her hand, still amazed after all these years at how perfectly it fit in his. "You told me you were not what I ordered. And you said I was exactly what you needed." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "Were you right?" "Penelope York, you were so much more than I needed. You were everything I did not even know I was missing. You took my survival and turned it into a life. You gave me a family, a home, a reason to dream bigger than just the next season." She was quiet for a moment and he saw tears on her cheeks, but they were happy tears. "I was so lost when I came here. I thought my life was over, that I had used up all my chances at happiness. But you saw me, really saw me, not as a problem to solve or a burden to carry, but as a person with value. You gave me space to become who I was meant to be." The door opened behind them and Samuel came out, now 12 years old and tall for his age. "Mama, Rose wants you to sing her to sleep." "She says no one else will do." Penelope stood, kissing Zechariah's cheek. "Duty calls. Do not stay out here too long, you need sleep." "I will be in soon." He watched her go inside with their son, heard the sound of voices and laughter, and felt contentment settle over him like a warm blanket. This was what he had built. Not just a ranch or a house, but a legacy. His children would grow up knowing they were loved, knowing they belonged, knowing they had roots deep enough to withstand any storm. 20 years after that first day when Penelope stepped off the stage, Zechariah stood in the same spot, but everything had changed. The ranch was now one of the most successful in the region. The house had been expanded twice and was full of the noise and chaos of family. Samuel was married now to a schoolteacher from Sacramento, and they lived in a house Zachariah had helped them build on the eastern section of the property. Grace had gone to university, the first in either family to do so, and was studying medicine. Daniel was working the ranch with his father, showing every sign of taking over one day. And Rose, their baby, was 16 and full of dreams about traveling the world. Penelope came to stand beside him, her hair now streaked with silver but her eyes still that same sage green that had captivated him from the first. She was 53 years old, and he thought she had never been more beautiful. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "How lucky I am." How one random mix-up led to everything that matters. She slipped her arm through his. "It was not random. I believe we were supposed to find each other that day. You needed someone to share your dreams with, and I needed someone who saw me as more than a problem or a scandal. We built something good, didn't we? We built something wonderful. A family, a home, a life full of love and purpose. We turned two broken people into something whole." Samuel and his wife arrived with their baby daughter, Zachariah, and Penelope's first grandchild. The little girl had dark curls in her grandmother's eyes, and when Penelope held her, Zachariah saw the same expression she had worn holding their own children: pure, uncomplicated love. That night, the whole family gathered for dinner. The table expanded to its maximum length to accommodate everyone. There was laughter and teasing, stories told and retold, plans made for the future. Zachariah sat at the head of the table with Penelope at his right hand, and he looked around at the faces of his children and grandchildren, at the life they had created together. After dinner, Penelope played the piano and they sang together, voices blending in harmony. It had become a family tradition, these musical evenings, and Zachariah knew his children would carry it forward into their own families. Later, in the privacy of their bedroom, Penelope brushed out her hair while Zachariah removed his boots. They had done this thousands of times, but it never felt routine. It felt like home. "Do you have any regrets?" he asked her. She turned to look at him, surprise in her expression. "Regrets, Zachariah? How could I regret anything? My life has been so much richer than I ever imagined possible." "But you gave up so much. You could have gone back east eventually, found a different life." She came to sit beside him on the bed. "I found my life right here, with you. Every choice I made, even the painful ones, led me to exactly where I was supposed to be. Theodore Whitmore betraying me was the best thing that ever happened to me because it brought me to you." He pulled her close, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair. "I love you, Penelope York, today and always. And I love you, Zachariah York. You took a chance on a desperate woman with nothing to her name but pride and heartache, and you gave her the world." "You gave me the world," he corrected. "Every day with you has been a gift." The seasons continued their eternal cycle, and the ranch prospered through good years and hard ones. When Zachariah was 65, he finally stepped back from the daily operations, turning over the management to Daniel while he took on an advisory role. It was harder than he expected, letting go of the work that had defined him for so long, but Penelope helped him find new purpose. Together they traveled, taking the train to San Francisco and Sacramento, visiting Grace in the city where she practiced medicine, seeing the ocean for the first time together. They went to visit Rose, who had married a diplomat and was living in Mexico City, and marveled at the life she had built so far from home. But they always came back to the ranch, to the house they had built, to the land that had witnessed their love story. This was where they belonged, where their roots were deepest. On their 40th anniversary, the whole family gathered for a celebration. There were grandchildren now, running through the house with the same energy their parents had shown. The newest generation was just beginning, great-grandchildren who would carry the family forward into the new century. Zachariah and Penelope renewed their vows under an oak tree, the same preacher who had married them all those years ago presiding, now ancient but still clear-minded. When it came time for Zachariah to speak his vows, he found himself overwhelmed with emotion. 40 years ago, I was a man who had forgotten how to dream. I was surviving, but I was not living. And then you stepped off a stage in Concord, California, and everything changed. You were not what I ordered, Penelope Everly York. You were so much better. You were everything I needed, everything I did not know I was missing. You have been my partner, my love, my best friend, my anchor in storms, and my joy in sunshine. You gave me children and grandchildren and a legacy that will outlive us both. You took my house and made it a home. You took my existence and made it a life worth living. I promise to love you today and all my remaining days with every fiber of my being. There was not a dry eye in the crowd, and Penelope was openly weeping as she spoke her own vows, reaffirming her love and commitment, thanking him for seeing her when she felt invisible, for believing in her when she had stopped believing in herself. They danced that evening, slower now but no less joyful, surrounded by the family they had created. The piano had been moved outside for the occasion, and Grace played while everyone took turns dancing under the stars. We did good, didn't we? Penelope said, her head on his shoulder as they swayed to the music. We did better than good. We did magnificent. Zachariah lived to be 79 years old, passing peacefully in his sleep with Penelope beside him. He had lived long enough to see his grandchildren married, to hold great-grandchildren, to know that everything he and Penelope had built would continue. His last words to her were simple: "Thank you for sharing your life with me." Penelope lived another 3 years, staying on the ranch surrounded by family. She spent her days working in her orchard, playing piano for her great-grandchildren, and telling stories about the early days, about a young woman with nothing but courage and a cowboy with dreams of something better. When she died at 82, she was buried beside Zachariah on the hill overlooking the ranch, under the oak trees they had planted together decades before. At her funeral, Samuel told the story one more time, the story that had become family legend. My mother always said she arrived as unexpected freight, he told the gathered crowd. She said she was not what my father ordered, but he told her she was exactly what he needed. And that simple exchange of words became the foundation of everything we are as a family. They taught us that sometimes the best things in life are the ones we never planned for. That courage means showing up even when you are scared. That love is a choice you make every single day. And that home is not a place, but the people who see you for who you really are and love you anyway. The ranch continued through the generations, but the story of Zachariah and Penelope lived on, told and retold, a reminder that sometimes getting exactly what you need means accepting what you never expected to receive. Their love had started with an accident, a mix-up, a woman stepping off a stage in a dusty California town. But what they built together was no accident. It was intentional, hard-won, and precious. It was a love story worthy of the Wild West, full of adventure and hardship and triumph. But most of all, it was a story about two people who chose each other, who built a life together from nothing, who turned desperation and disappointment into hope and happiness. The house still stands, now owned by the 5th generation of their family. The oak trees they planted have grown massive, their branches providing shade for new generations. And on summer evenings, if you listen carefully, you might hear the sound of a piano playing in the distance, the melody carrying on the wind like a memory of love that refused to be forgotten. Because that is the truth about real love, the kind that Zachariah and Penelope shared. It does not fade with time. It grows deeper, stronger, more essential. It becomes part of the landscape, as permanent and enduring as the mountains on the horizon. It transforms not just the people who share it, but everyone they touch, rippling outward through generations. And it all started with a simple misunderstanding, a woman with nowhere to go and a cowboy with room in his life for something he did not know he was missing. She was not what he ordered. She was exactly what he needed. And together, they proved that the greatest love stories are the ones we never see coming, the ones that ambush us when we are least prepared and change everything we thought we knew about what our lives could be. Their story became more than just their own. It became a testament to the power of second chances, to the courage it takes to start over, to the magic that happens when two broken pieces find a way to fit together perfectly. The ranch was their legacy, yes, but more important was the example they set. That love is not about perfection, but about showing up, working hard, and choosing each other every single day. Years after both had passed, a great-great-granddaughter found a letter Penelope had written but never sent, tucked into one of her old books. In it, she had written, "People ask me sometimes if I regret the circumstances that brought me west, if I wish things had gone differently. I tell them that I regret nothing. Every hardship, every disappointment, every moment of fear and uncertainty was worth it because it led me to Zachariah. He saw me when I felt invisible. He valued me when I felt worthless. He loved me when I felt unlovable. And together we built a life more beautiful than any I could have imagined. I stepped off that stage expecting nothing, and I received everything. That is grace. That is love. That is the story I want remembered." And so it was remembered, passed down through the generations, a reminder that sometimes the best things in life come disguised as disasters, that what we think we need is often less important than what we actually receive, and that love, real love, has the power to transform everything. The ranch thrived because it was built on that foundation, on the understanding that family means showing up for each other, working together, and never giving up no matter how hard things get. Every person who grew up there carried those lessons forward into their own lives, spreading the influence of Zachariah and Penelope's love far beyond the boundaries of their land. And on quiet evenings when the work is done, and the family gathers on that porch Zachariah dreamed of building all those years ago, someone always tells the story again. The story of the cowboy and the mail-order bride who was never actually ordered. The story of two people who found each other through chance and chose each other through love. The story that reminds everyone that miracles happen every day, often in the most unexpected ways, and that the greatest adventure of all is opening your heart to possibilities you never imagined. That is the legacy of Zachariah and Penelope York. Not just a successful ranch or a large family, but a love story that proved what is possible when two people dare to dream together, to work together, to build together. They started with nothing but hope and determination. They ended with everything that matters. And the land still bears witness to their love in every fence post Zachariah placed, every tree Penelope planted, every corner of the house they built together with their own hands and endless faith in each other. Theirs was a love for the ages, rooted in the red California dirt, strengthened by hardship, and refined by years of choosing each other over and over again. It was Wild West romance at its finest, practical and passionate, hard-won and tender, full of struggle and triumph. And it all began with 7 simple words that changed 2 lives forever. "You're exactly what I needed."